Welcome to the An Echo of the Past channel. I'm William Shakespeare, playwright of Avon, poet, actor, and a man whose words have become an immortal part of world literature. Today I'll tell you my story, the story of a simple boy from Stratford who dared to dream of theater and poetry. The story of how I created Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, and dozens of other characters that live on stages around the world today. The story of a love of words, of tragedies and comedies, of a life that was itself a play. I have written 37 plays, 144 sonnets and poems that have moved hearts for over 400 years. My words have been quoted by kings and beggars, lovers and philosophers. To be or not to be is the question I have put to the world, and the world answers me to this day. Don't forget to subscribe to An Echo of the Past channel. Give a like. I am William Shakespeare, and this is my story. The story of the soul of a writer who believed that all the world is a stage and all men only actors. Ah, childhood. That golden time when the soul, as yet untainted by the world, opens to beauty like the blossom of the morning dew. Let me take you back to 1564, to the little town of Stratford upon Avon, where on April 23rd, the day of St. George, the patron saint of England, a boy named William was born. That boy was me, Stratford. Oh, how sweet the name sounds in my memory. A small market town embraced by the River Avon, which wound through the countryside like a silver ribbon in the green hair of nature. Wooden houses with thatched roofs, narrow streets smelling of fresh bread and straw, a bridge where I used to fish as a boy and dream of distant lands. My father, John Shakespeare, was a glover, a man whose hands knew the secrets of the leather and the needle, who could make something useful and beautiful out of a simple animal hide. His workshop in Henley Street was my first theater. The smell of leather, wax, and dye mingled with the sound of the hammer and the singing of the apprentices. My father was a practical, ambitious man. He became a counselor, later even the town's mayor. "Willie," he used to say to me in his deep voice, "the world belongs to those who can count and bargain. Remember, money is the blood of business." But my mother, Mary Arden, she was another soul altogether. She came from an ancient noble family, albeit a poor one. In her veins ran the blood of the Ardens. In her heart lived the poetry and legends of old. In the evening, when the darkness enveloped Stratford in its purple cloak, she would sit by the fire and tell us stories. "Willie," she whispered to me as the flames danced shadows on the walls, "words have power greater than the swords of kings. With words you can create worlds that never existed. Words can make you laugh or cry, lift a soul to the heavens or cast it into the abyss." How prophetic were her words. She told me of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, of Lancelot and his forbidden love for Queen Guinevere, of Merlin the magician, of dragons and fairies. Each story was like a seed planted in the soil of my childhood imagination, which later grew into the mighty tree of my dramatic creation. When I was 7 years old, I entered King's New School, a grammar school for the sons of burgesses. How strict the teachers were. The reed was their gentlest instrument of pedagogy. But I loved learning like a bee loves flowers. Latin, Greek, rhetoric. These were the keys that opened the gates to the gardens of ancient wisdom. For the first time I read Ovid, Virgil, Horatio, Ovid's Metamorphoses. What a revelation. Tales of gods turning into animals, trees, stars, of Apollo and Daphne, of Pyramus and Thisbe, a story I later rewrote for Romeo and Juliet. Each page was like a window into another world, where the divine and the human mingled, where love conquered death, and where words had the power to change reality. At school, we also put on plays, religious mysteries about the creation of the world, the fall of Lucifer, the crucifixion of Christ. For the first time, I stood on the stage, albeit an improvised one, just a few planks in the square, and felt that unrepeatable moment when the boy William became someone else. Angel, demon, king, beggar. I could have been anyone. It was like a magical ritual of transformation, like the alchemy of the soul. And the audience. Oh, the audience. I saw their faces, laughter, tears, amazement. That's when I understood that theater is not just entertainment. It's a mirror in which humanity sees itself. It is a temple where the mysteries of human existence are celebrated. Stratford had its dark side. When I was 4 years old, the plague came. The Black Death that cut people like scythes cut grass. I saw coffins being carried through the streets, heard the cries of mothers, felt the pervasive fear that hung in the air like poison gas. It taught me that life is as fragile as a glass jar, that death lurks around every corner like a tiger in the jungle. And perhaps that's why I later wrote about death with such intensity. Hamlet, with poor Yorick's skull in his hands, Romeo and Juliet dead in the family tomb, Macbeth wading through blood, King Lear holding the dead Cordelia in his arms. In the evening, I used to sit at my chamber window and look at the stars over Stratford. How brightly they shone in the darkness. Each star was like an unanswered question, a mystery waiting to be solved. One day, I whispered into the night, I will write stories that will live forever. One day, I will be a poet whose name the whole world will know. I was a naive boy with a head full of dreams. But as I say in The Tempest, we are made of the stuff dreams are made of, and our short lives are surrounded by sleep. My childhood in Stratford taught me to observe people, and that's the greatest gift a playwright can be given. The merchant in the market negotiating the price of wool, the priest preaching from the pulpit about sin and salvation, the beggar at the bridge with a blank stare, the nobleman on horseback with a lordly expression. Each was a story. Each had a mask, a secret, a truth hidden beneath the surface. I was learning to read those masks, to listen to what is not said, to see what is hidden. And that later became the basis of my art, the ability to penetrate beneath the surface of the human soul, to see the Hamlet in each of us, the Macbeth, the Othello, the Lear. These were the foundations, a love of language from my mother, practicality from my father, stories from ancient books, live theater in the town square, observing life in Stratford. It all mixed in me like ingredients in an alchemist's crucible. And one day, out of it came plays that, if you'll allow me the small matter of pride, changed the world of theater forever. After years spent in school and dreaming of the great world, the time came when I had to take my first big step into real life. In 1582, when I was 18, I married Anne Hathaway. She was 8 years older, from the village of Shottery near Stratford, and she was a courageous and strong woman, though perhaps not as educated as I was. It was a union that many considered a surprise. Not that we were unhappy, but my dreams reached far beyond the quiet life of a small town. When our first child was born, our daughter Susanna, I felt I was standing on the threshold of new responsibilities. 2 years later, twins were born, Judith and Hamnet. Little Hamnet was my darling, my shadow, my inspiration. But life in Stratford confined me. The town was too small for my dreams, too quiet for my soul, which longed for theater and fame. I often sat by the River Avon, watching the boats heading for London, the city where stories are born. where art becomes life. My marriage to Anne was complicated. I loved my children, but my relationship with my wife was more a duty than a passion. I often wondered whether my place was truly here, among gloves and quiet routines. And then came a turning point. The exact reason remains uncertain. Perhaps I had trouble with the law for poaching, or perhaps I simply needed room for my ambitions. But I decided to leave, and so, one day, I left Stratford, without a grand farewell, without dramatic scenes. Perhaps I was selfish, perhaps brave, but I knew that to become who I was meant to be, I had to leave behind everything I knew. Anne stayed with our 3 children. I promised to provide for them from afar, to send money. But in my heart, I knew I would never again be merely a husband and father from peaceful Stratford. Something greater awaited me. When I left the town, I did not look back. London was calling, and I answered. London, around 1587, a city full of life, noise, passion, and opportunity. When I arrived there, I was about 23 and a complete nobody, a young man from Stratford with no fortune, no powerful connections, and a heavy accent. But I had one thing stronger than all else: words. The first years were hard. I had to make a living any way I could, helping in theaters, watching over horses before performances, building scenery. The London theater world was rough, full of rivalry and envy. But I observed, I learned, I absorbed the atmosphere. Gradually, I found my way into acting with small companies. I was no star actor. My voice and figure were average, but I could understand characters, feel their souls, and I began rewriting old plays, improving dialogues, adding new scenes. My first own plays were experimental, historical pieces about English kings, blending politics with human drama. Henry VI, in several parts, showed that I could write about power, betrayal, and ambition. The turning point came around 1593, when I wrote Venus and Adonis, an erotic poem dedicated to the young Earl of Southampton. The poem became a bestseller. Suddenly, I was no longer just a theater worker, but a recognized poet. In 1594, another change came. I joined the prestigious company Lord Chamberlain's Men. That was the big league. We had a permanent stage, royal support, and the best actors. And I became their principal playwright. I began to write faster, with more confidence and boldness. Comedies like A Midsummer Night's Dream revealed my humor and imagination. Tragedies like Romeo and Juliet proved that I could write about love in a way that tore the heart apart. In London taverns, I debated with other playwrights, Marlowe, Johnson, Fletcher. Sometimes we were friends, sometimes rivals, but we all knew we were creating something new, English theater that could rival the ancients. In 1599, something incredible happened. We built the Globe Theatre, our own wooden circular temple of drama on the south bank of the Thames. There, I presented Julius Caesar, As You Like It, and began work on Hamlet. I was no longer an outsider. I was William Shakespeare, playwright, poet, shareholder of a theater company. My story of rising from a poor boy from Stratford to a star of London's stage was itself like one of my own plays, but I had not yet reached the summit. That was to come in the following years, when I would write my most celebrated tragedies and secure my place in history. After years of hard work and constant refinement of my craft, the time came when I saw the fruits of my labor in full bloom. My plays began to resonate throughout England, and I became not only a respected playwright, but a favorite of both the public and the court. Between 1597 and 1610, I wrote most of my most famous works. Those were the years when I created heroes and heroines who still live in people's hearts today. Hamlet, the tormented prince who contemplates life and death with a skull in his hand. Romeo and Juliet, the tragic lovers whose bond transcends family hatred and even death. Macbeth, a fascinating portrait of pride and ruin. And comedies that entertained and enlightened, A Midsummer Night's Dream, As You Like It, and Twelfth Night. My plays were not mere entertainment or moral lessons. They were mirrors of the human soul. I captured every shade of emotion, from deepest despair to unrestrained joy. People laughed, wept, pondered, and often recognized themselves in my characters. I was also an actor and producer. Together with Lord Chamberlain's men, we performed my plays before the royal court and on the streets of London. Theater was not just my work, it was my life. My poems, especially the sonnets I began writing around 1599, were my most intimate confessions. In them, I explored love, beauty, the passage of time, and death. They often reflected my own uncertainty and my longing for immortality through art. By that time, I was at an age when I understood how powerful words could be. When I wrote Henry IV, Queen Mab, or King Lear, I knew I was creating something that would outlive me. My plays influenced not only theater, but European culture as a whole. They were translated, performed, and studied for generations. My characters became archetypes that inspired artists, philosophers, and politicians alike. And yet, even as I was celebrated and admired, I never forgot my roots. Stratford upon Avon remained my soul and my refuge. My golden age was the peak of my artistic life, but I knew that no glory lasts forever. Every play, every word, every character was my challenge to time itself. My golden age brought not only fame, but also trials that come to all who reach the top. While my plays were celebrated on stages across England, I faced envy, criticism, and political intrigue. The London theater world was harsh. Rivals tried to damage my reputation, spreading rumors about my background and education. "How can a Glover's son write such masterpieces?" they whispered, but I knew that talent is not a matter of lineage, but of the soul. In 1603, Queen Elizabeth I died, and James I ascended the throne. For me, it meant a new beginning. Our company was renamed the King's Men, and we became official court actors. It was a triumph, but also a great responsibility. During this time, I wrote some of my darkest works. Othello, a story of jealousy that destroys all we love. King Lear, a tragedy of old age, pride, and betrayal. The Tempest, my final great play, in which I said farewell to the theater as the magician Prospero breaking his staff. My personal life was not always happy. I was separated from my family in Stratford. My wife Anne stayed home while I lived in London. My son Hamlet died as a child, a pain I poured into many of my characters. Still, I carried on. I knew my art was my legacy, my immortality. Every play I wrote was a piece of my soul given to the world. After 1610, I began to feel it was time to end my London career. I was around 46, already an older man for my time. My body betrayed me more often, and my mind longed for peace. I returned to Stratford upon Avon, to my house New Place, which I had bought at the height of my fame. Stratford was my refuge, the town of my childhood, a place where I could simply be William, not the great Shakespeare. I spent time with my family, took walks along the River Avon, where I had once dreamed of greatness as a boy. I wrote only a few final plays, The Winter's Tale, Cymbeline, and The Tempest. In The Tempest, I poured my farewell to the theater into the character of the magician Prospero, who breaks his magic staff and says, "Now my charms are all o'erthrown." My final years were filled with memories. I thought of the people I had met, actors, nobles, common folk. I recalled my plays, the laughter and tears of audiences, the applause that filled the Globe Theatre. On April 23, 1616, on my 52nd birthday, I breathed my last. It was as if I had closed a perfect circle, born and died on the same day. Fate had its own sense of drama. I was buried in the Holy Trinity Church in Stratford, where I had once been baptized. Upon my gravestone was carved a warning. "Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." But my work lived on. My characters, Hamlet, Romeo, Juliet, Macbeth, Othello, Lear, became immortal. My words transcended borders of land and time. I was but a man with a pen, yet I captured the entire human world. And that is my true immortality. Thank you for walking this path with me. Subscribe to An Echo of the Past, give a like, and share my stories, so the world never forgets the power of words and the beauty of the theater. The past whispers, and the future listens.